Welcome to this IAB Brand Academy. It's called Cannabis Category Growth and the Untapped Opportunity for Advertisers. It's in association with Philo. My name is Graham Spencer and I'm on the Learning and Development team here at the IAB. The IAB empowers the media and marketing industries to thrive in the digital economy. Its membership comprises more than 700 leading media companies, brands, agencies, and the technology firms responsible for selling, delivering, and optimizing digital ad marketing campaigns. We field critical research on interactive advertising while also educating brands, agencies, and the wider business community on the importance of digital marketing. And in affiliation with the IAB Tech Lab, the IAB develops technical standards and solutions. We're committed to professional development and elevating the knowledge, skills, expertise, and diversity of the workforce across the industry. We are welcoming more and more brands into the IAB fold, and I know many of you are here today. Please find out more at iab.com to find out more about the benefits of IAB membership. And without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to our wonderful host for today's Philo Brand Academy, Jeff Ragovin, Chief Commercial Officer at Philo, and Jesse Shannon, Chief Growth Officer at Columbia Care.
Awesome. Well, Graham, thank you so much. And it's great to see everybody. And yeah, we've got a very exciting session today. Obviously, I'm co-hosting with my good friend, Jesse. Welcome, Jesse. And a lot of exciting things have been happening in the space. And I'm sure if you've seen the news and you're paying attention to what's happened on the legalization front, there are states coming on board. Cannabis is really in that super hyper growth mode right now. And, I think from just looking at what's happened in the last couple of years, kind of, beginning in COVID all the way through now, it's the first time that cannabis has actually been a designated essential business, which is pretty incredible. Tons of states legalizing, tons of brands popping up. And what we're really trying to do today is talk to you guys on how traditional brands are actually using the data around what consumers are buying when it comes to cannabis. So, just as we get started, Jesse and I work very closely together. Jesse's the Chief Growth Officer at Columbia Care, which is, one of the largest multi-state operators in cannabis. And so, Jesse, I think, when we first started working together a few years ago, you guys were literally only medical. And then with rapid legalization, you've now opened up stores across the country. And now you're medical and recreational, which has also created a lot of new consumers coming into your stores. So I think, I would love for you to just, before we even get started today, just give a quick, update on your role and Columbia Care and how you guys have really exploded with this category.
Yeah, I mean, look, not to bore anyone too much, but to Jeff's point, Columbia Care is one of the oldest and largest multi-state operators in the country. Now, we hold licenses and operate in 18 jurisdictions across the US as well as in the EU. We're vertically integrated, which is a term you'll hear a lot in our industry. What that means is we basically do everything from seed to sale, right? So we cultivate, manufacture, distribute, and ultimately retail our products in all the markets that we operate. So we operate around 32 or so cultivation and manufacturing facilities across the country, making up millions of square feet of indoor and hundreds of acres of outdoor grow. And we operate around 100 dispensaries right now that are either open or under construction. So to your point, Jeff, when I first joined Columbia Care, it's been about 2.5 years now. We were known as sort of the medical company. And a lot of the states that we operated in then, and even more so now, were either converted to adult use recreational or going through that process. And so that's created just an incredible wealth of, and I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today, an incredible wealth of data and insights that's coming out of that. That honestly reminds me a lot of our background early on in social, where we saw sort of this explosion of user growth that was across this sort of a broad demographic base that we really hadn't seen before, as far as the adoption of the technology reaching so many different individuals. And it's very similar in cannabis, right? We see a lot of people integrating the plant into their life, obviously for many different reasons, but it's been a lot of fun to watch. Totally. Yeah. And I think, Jess, you just bring up a really important point there. Right? We looked at social back in 2007 and Facebook opening up to the world. I remember, back then I co-founded Buddy Media, sold it to Salesforce, but I remember one of my first few meetings,
with HBO. I'm like, you got to get on Facebook. You got to do all these campaigns. They're like, no, we're not sure yet. We don't know if Facebook's going to make it, right? It's the same thing what's happening now with cannabis, right? It's just like we have this incredible opportunity. We have really rich data that we're using on the traditional brand side as well. And that's one of the things we want to talk to you guys about today. So, open up your minds. If you have questions, use the chat to ask, and we'll get to those towards the end of the webinar. But really what we're trying to accomplish today is, giving an understanding of who actually is that, cannabis consumer, how they align with traditional brands and verticals, and really how you as a mainstream brand out there can actually capture, the hearts, minds, and the attention of the cannabis consumer, which does spend a lot of money. So hopefully that's what we'll try to get out of the session today. It's very exciting. We don't have any freebies for everybody as far as, gummies and joints, but contact us separately and we'll see.
Depends on the market that you're sitting in right now. Shoot us a message.
Exactly. So, guys, for everybody who's joining us today, we actually do have a show called the Alchemy Podcast, which you can find essentially on any platform, whether it's Spotify, Google, iHeart, Apple. And we have a show every single week, and we feature a lot of, very large cannabis multi-state operators, and also a lot of brands, but also a lot of celebrities that are getting into the space. And so Jesse is actually, he's been on the show multiple times. He's in the top left. That was actually when he did get a haircut. If you're interested in learning more, there's great sessions. We had Mike Tyson on recently. We had Jim Belushi, and a ton of really amazing folks. And we wanted to do today's webinar kind of like if we were doing a podcast, but with a couple of slides to support. So it's going to be very conversational. It'll be fun. And if you want to learn more too, definitely listen to the show. So, as we're kind of talking about the space, let's just take a look at, some of the numbers right now. So, in 2022 alone, right, there's $21 billion in licensed market US retail sales on the cannabis side. That's incredible. By 2030, we're looking at a $65 billion market. So this is something that we just cannot ignore, right? If you're a traditional brand and you're trying to figure out, hey, I want to start connecting with new consumers that are progressive in a different way, now is definitely the right time, because we have so much traction and there's so much happening in the space right now. I think what Jesse was saying originally, they started off in just the medical market. It was very streamlined to ailments, conditions, people who really needed the plant to live, whether it could be, it might have been cancer or back pain or glaucoma or whatever it might be. Today, obviously, they have all these shops on the recreational side. It has welcomed so many new patients and new customers who are utilizing it for other parts of their life, whether it's focus or relaxation or sleep or just a good time. So when we look at what's actually happening across the country right now, it's pretty amazing. So the next slide really kind of lights up a little bit on what's happening across the US. So if you look at the map right now, you could actually see the West is, prolific in legal cannabis sales. The Midwest is one of the biggest hotspots. And then the Northeast, just this past year, obviously New York, New Jersey, Connecticut coming on board has opened up so much opportunity. So Jesse, I think, from your vantage point, you guys are acquiring companies, you're opening up stores all over. The last 2 years has been it's been a record when it comes to cannabis. So what has kind of been your perception? Because your customer has changed, right? Who are they?
Yeah, massively. And look, I think to go back to one of the slide that you were just on, and to speak to this one as well, I think they both speak to the same story. There's an incredible phenomena that's happening right now in the people that we serve, right? The communities and the individuals that we serve across these markets. And that is that, unlike, I think, many other challenges in marketing and building brands and building a retail ecosystem, et cetera, I say it all the time. I'll take the over on the 65 billion, by the way, on 2030. I'm going to say that this is a $90 billion industry by 2026. Okay. And I think that so much of it depends on the conversion of the gray and illicit market to the regulated markets. And hopefully, knock on wood, we continue to see more progression in regulatory and sort of federal movement in order to open up safe banking, to allow for more scaled sort of finances and production, which ultimately then lower the cost of goods. And we're able to bring safe, regulated, tested products to the markets that we serve at a cost that's roughly equivalent with buying it illicitly. And I think that's going to be another fundamental shift, right? But even using those numbers and using this map, which is just a couple of green check marks, right? In the grand scheme of things. Yeah. We don't know 75% of the customers that we're ultimately going to serve over the next 2 to 3 years. And that's incredible to think about. But if you really pause and think about it, 21 billion this year, and let's say 50 to 65 billion in the next few years, whatever it may be, it doesn't mean that our existing customer base is going to smoke 3 times as much weed, right, over the next 3 years. It means that we're going to see a continued expansion of that addressable market, of the communities, the patients, and the customers that we serve. And more people are going to be integrating cannabis into their lives. Now, we see that basically come across in the data, Jeff, to your point. We see it in 2 ways. It's an expansion of uses with regards to forms, formulations, brands, things like that. And it's also an expansion of those demographics. So the audiences that are ultimately consuming those products. So one of the things that we know is when you first open up an adult use or recreational market, about 65% or so of those sales that take place are going to be in flower-based products. So what we would refer to as like loose flower, buying an eighth of cannabis or pre-rolls. As those markets mature, some of the green check marks that you guys see here, like California, Colorado, and others, that number is going to shrink, and it's going to end up somewhere between 45 and 50%. You're going to see more people leveraging edibles and hard pressed tablets and, more sort of concentrate-based products and formulations. That in itself, then I think is very indicative of the audience change that we see with regards to the people that we serve. So as more and more, consumers and customers come into the space, you see an increase with regards to female as a percentage of that population, or 45 to 64, or a number of these other things that are moving away from just smoking a J and finding a way to sort of complement or replace a glass of Chardonnay, or, just use something to relax, to sleep, to ease pain, health and wellness applications. So
Jesse, I feel like that's a really good point, because now that we're starting to see this massive consumer adoption, what usually happens with consumer adoption? You have celebrities that follow, and celebrities that really start to come out of the woodwork and launch their own brand. So I feel like this is a good juncture in our discussion to really talk about what's happening in the space. Public opinion around cannabis is at an all-time high, right? So I think if we go to the next slide, we could even see there's some very familiar faces that many of you out there probably could say, hey, I know that's Martha Stewart or Jay-Z or Gwyneth Paltrow or Joe Rogan or whoever it might be. Martha Stewart has canvassed her CBD products all over the place. You see it online, you see it on TV. She's on every show. She's with Snoop. They're talking about, cannabis and CBD together. I mean, I have my mom calling me, Jesse, saying, hey, Martha came out with these new delicious CBD, edibles. Should I buy them? And so for my mom, for the first time in my entire life, and I'm in my mid 40s, calling me about CBD is crazy, because I would never in a million years think even my mom would want, to try a product. But because this is a lifestyle product, it's good for your health, it's like a vitamin, we've seen such this incredible rise, even in just the last 2 years, of people who want to take care of their bodies and take care of their health. How many clients, Jesse, do you work with in the non-cannabis side, whether it's a CMO or a CEO, is like, Jesse, I love your edibles because I need to sleep at night, right? A lot.
So I think, look, to speak to that, I actually know, Jeff, where your mom is located. So without giving too much away, I will say, we were the first medical provider to open in New York City, right? Right. And when I would do presentations early on, when we would be talking specifically about the customers and the patients that we serve across the country, I would say, hey, listen, it's not going to come as a surprise to anyone that in California or Colorado or Arizona, a number of other states on the West Coast where we do adult use and recreational, our average consumer is a 25 to 34-year-old male. But in New York City, our average customer was a 55-year-old female. Yeah. And people would just sort of sit back and they'd go, and this is not just CBD. This is at this time, right? We're speaking about medicinal marijuana. And you would just have to, you just sort of say, listen, the application of this product set I think is way more universal than anyone thinks of at sort of initial blush. But yeah, to your point, I mean, we see obviously an incredible array of celebrities and athletes, retired athletes for the most part, from all walks of life that come into this space. And I think that what's really interesting about it is a lot of them are coming with very authentic experiences with the products for themselves in their personal life. And so they want to share that. I mean, Seth is a perfect example of that, right? But they also, if you look at even just this slide, right, it represents a really interesting sort of array of demographics and communities. And that is very similar to what we see as we try to merchandise our stores and ultimately formulate and go into R&D for new products throughout the country. Is we're serving a lot of different people in patients and customers. And I think it's a really interesting space for that reason. I can't think of many other products or sort of CPG companies that when you look at one brand have such a different use case as well as such a wide sort of community of individuals that they serve.
Yeah, and I think, Jesse, it's, if you start thinking about the amount of consumers across the US who are consuming, right? And I think we have some numbers we can throw up there right now. It's massive, right? We're talking 65 million cannabis and CBD consumers across the country, right? That's more than 1 in 4 adults out there in this country. And so I think for a lot of marketers who are on this call right now, this is where we're really trying to say, hey, guys, don't forget about this market. Don't forget about this segment. We see all sorts of brands attaching themselves to Super Bowl and, the 4th of July and St. Patrick's Day and, the NCAA and, so on and so forth. And so, I'm sure you guys have noticed this, but every year in April, there's, it's called 420, but it's essentially Cannabis Month, really celebrated on the day of 420. And we've been seeing a very sharp rise of more and more mainstream traditional non-cannabis brands attaching themselves to something cheeky, something with cannabis to really appeal to a lot of consumers. And so that's where we're really going on the data, right? So if you think about the data out there, and Jesse carries so many different products at all of his various stores, we're able to actually understand what are people buying. So when it comes to CBD, right, is it pills? Is it pre-rolls? Is it lozenges? Is it gummies? Is it topicals, right? There's so many different variations. And then there's flower, there's pre-roll, there's edibles, there's gummies, there's chocolates, there's chews, right? So you have this really massive taxonomy. And then it's been infused with the normal psychographic and demographic data that you can get anywhere. So I could say to Jesse, tomorrow, we can target, cannabis consumers who are spending $200 or more on flower or pre-roll, but also work out at Equinox and watch The Gilded Age on HBO, right? We can get very, very targeted on who that consumer is. And so when we think about this new consumer, we think about them in this kind of progressive mindset, right? So they're 25% more likely to seek out variety in their everyday lives. They're 24% more likely to be an influencer, which is interesting because, if you look at what's happening now on social, there's some restrictions on what you can do with cannabis. So, Facebook in particular and Instagram, they don't like cannabis. They don't appeal to cannabis right now because it's still federally illegal. However, most of the publishers out there across the board, thousands of mainstream premium sites now accept THC and CBD inventory, right? So we have this movement that's really taken place. And then I think also on the propensity to buy, right? They are spenders. They're not savers, right? They're the first to try new products. They're more likely to make impulse purchases. I'd say me and Jesse too. And they're 14% more likely to be receptive to mobile advertising. And that's also because there's a core demographic that really lives on their phones, right? We do have this generation of consumers that have really been attached to social, crypto, NFTs, right? They're following the news cycles and they're always on and they're always connected. And so they happen to engage with ads that really appeal to them and what they're doing. So really kind of exciting stuff. Jesse, I think probably 3 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this discussion because we were still breaking barriers with trying to get legalization across a lot of these states.
There's no question. And I think that, just to sort of brag on you guys as a partner for a second, right? But I think that you and a number of other companies, right, throughout our space have helped to open up so many of those doors when it comes to compliant inventory now, which was not as readily available 2 or 3 years ago. So I think what you're seeing is an expansion of the data and the insights, things like you're floating up here, which I think are incredibly interesting. Coming from a former life in ad tech and media buying, when we would be thinking about planning and executing large scale campaigns for marketers, we're always looking for that next audience that's ultimately going to unlock sort of the ability to resonate, right? For a message to resonate or to create an engagement or an action. And this is a really unique audience that are incredibly authentic. They're super brand loyal. They're very progressive in the things that they'll try, to your point. And so it's been a lot of fun to watch, but the expansion of the available inventory has also created an explosion of the data exhaust that comes off of that, which continues to give us more insights as we mesh those things together with stuff like data from our point of sale, right? Or from our loyalty programs and a number of things that we can do. Cannabis is a bit unique that our entire industry is almost profile based, right? We're almost like a retail Facebook because
right.
You have to check in as you come in, right, to the dispensary ecosystem or be a registered patient or a number of other things. So there are certain things that we can understand about these customer and patient bases that make them a little bit less anonymous at times than other industries where you're just sort of walking into a store.
So Jesse, let's kind of take a look at some of the verticals that we see a lot of alignment and also where consumers are really showing up for. So, just from a mainstream perspective, and I think there's probably a lot of folks on this call who are coming from various segments, if you're in the beer and spirits industry, right? Cannabis consumers are 25% more likely to consume alcohol at a bar or club as well, right? So you're over indexing, across this category in a very big way. Think, all of the sporting events, think all the entertainment events, concerts, people going out with their friends. Now that everything is, back open again, and we're looking at COVID as a past, crossing our fingers, more and more people are going out and sharing experiences again. This was very interesting. We worked with a number of, beer companies, which I can't name on this webinar, but they really wanted to test this data because during COVID, bars were closed and they were losing in a very big way. So they needed to play some defense because they were doing focus groups out there. And their consumers actually said, yeah, I'm not consuming as much of your product because I've switched to edibles, right? And so that scared them for a moment. They're like, hey, maybe we should start buying this data on what people are actually buying when it comes to cannabis, because we have new products that are coming out that we want to get in front of them with. And it worked very well. So I think the alcohol and spirits market is a massive category. Beauty in particular, huge. 33% are more likely to have had a pro makeover. People care about themselves. They care about how they look. They also like spending money there too. It's really, if you think about it, every category. I mean, we can make a joke about food and beverage all we want, but you're probably seeing some of the largest QSRs out there, buying a tremendous amount of data when it comes to cannabis transactions, because Jesse, what happens when people consume cannabis related products?
Well, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it enhances certain experiences for sure. I think, look, one of the interesting things.
I'm saying the hunger level, Jesse.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Trust me,
it
would be one of those. I mean, I'm looking at entertainment and grocery and all of these things as well. And I mean, I think there's two things that to me jump out, right? And that is, one, we are considered complementary to many of these experiences. And the other thing is the data points that you pulled out here, I think very clearly show that it is a incredibly progressive customer set that is willing to spend, sort of the expendable income calculation is weighted more heavily in sort of experience and testing and having fun and trying new things. And that is, to your point, I mean, food delivery, like that's a no-brainer, right? Yeah. With our industry. I try not to put all of our customers and patients in too much of a bucket when it comes to
Jesse, think about this. Think about, we have so much access today to things like Postmates, Instacart, Grubhub, like all of the food delivery companies. And let's just say someone's at home, they're after work and they're, smoking a joint or even taking an edible to relax and unwind, and they get the munchies. what's the first thing they're doing? They're going on their device and they're ordering food, or they're going on Instacart and they're like, oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to start getting all the things that I want, because you never go to the supermarket when you're hungry, but we all do anyway, right? And so I think there's so many categories right now that we can, kind of merge together between food and beverage, health and fitness, work and lifestyle. We actually have a slide after this on the vertical slide that really talks about, how people are also utilizing it outside of verticals, like lifestyles. And Jesse, I know, we've worked out together at City Row, which is kind of like, the Peloton of rowers. They have tons of studios across the country, but then they also have this incredibly, beautiful home device. It's a rowing machine with a beautiful screen. And, they were buying a lot of data from us because they wanted to tap into folks who were purchasing CBD, but also over-index with working out. Because a lot of people who are taking CBD related products, they're taking it for muscle recovery, they're taking it to sleep, and they're taking it to chill out, right? And so it's something that they're like, hey, that could work well for us. The return on ad spend was through the roof on converting to rowers because we're able to be super hyper local when it comes to the targeting, right? And I think that's something that everyone can think about. It doesn't work for every single brand, right? There might be some fairly conservative brands out there where it might be like, yeah, maybe let's give it another year. But you see all these companies that are starting to come out with their own products. Just last week, I'm sure you saw this news, Pepsi came out with, their Rockstar product that now has hemp seed. Why? Well, they're trying to appeal to this audience, right? That knows about hemp, that knows about CBD, that knows about cannabis related products, right? Game Fuel that also came out from Pepsi is it's a product that you drink when you're gaming, but gamers also have over-indexed very high on consuming cannabis related products, right? And so you see mainstream with endemic cannabis starting to merge together. I'm sure many of us, it's not going to be a surprise when, some of the big guys come out with an alcohol related product that is also incorporated into cannabis, right? And I'm curious from you, Jesse, as you're starting to see, the mainstream acceleration, like big brand, big spirits, big beer companies adopting cannabis because they're seeing what's happening in Canada right now, right? Yeah. It's legal in Canada everywhere, right? In the US, we have pockets of legal states, but we still are waiting for federal legalization. I think that's the holdup sometimes with these big, blue chip brands out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's already a number of crossover beverages, right? So you see some things with wine, you see what Tilray is doing in buying Sweetwater as a brand, and a number of other things. So the writing's on the wall that a lot of these breweries and vineyards and things like that will ultimately sort of co-produce products that have alcohol and THC. I would say probably not together, more than likely, but sort of existing in their own formats, right? I think the technology in the space developed in a way that now allows us to have much better experiences. You look at beverage is an incredible opportunity for the industry, but up until, fairly recently with nanosolubles and fast acting and things like that, it probably didn't make as much sense for any of you that have, had an edible, let's say more than 2 to 3 years ago. It may have taken 45 minutes to an hour for the onset of those effects. Now you have fast acting solutions, things that we formulate across the country that are going to be 5 to 15 minutes. You're going to feel an onset, which is not incredibly different than sitting down and having a glass of wine or a beer or a cocktail or anything else. So I think you're going to see more and more crossover with those mainstream things. I think the majority of the big brands will obviously wait until we have some sort of federal regulation, or they feel incredibly protected. But, to the point that you made earlier, all of this comes back to the fact that it is very normalized now, right? Yeah. Cannabis with regards to usage. No one in this country, I mean, the elections are basically contested at, almost 50-50. So the country is split on almost everything. But it's almost a 90% consensus within this country that adults feel that there should be some sort of meaningful regulation to cannabis, and around 61% support for full federal legalization. So those are staggering numbers when you think about the fact we can't agree on anything as a country at this point. So I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think if we look at some of the products already, right? So we have Jones Soda, lots of news out there. I know you have a number of partnerships with them. they're launching their own soda line around cannabis, right? I mentioned Pepsi, Lagunitas, which is part of Heineken. They have their Hi-Fi Hops beer product, which is, it's non-alcoholic, but it actually has, cannabis in that product. And then last year around 420, which we saw the most support ever, as legalization really started picking up steam and public opinion was so intense around cannabis in a good way, you saw ads from Adidas, Reebok, HBO, Comedy Central, Burger King, Jimmy John, Shake Shack, Denny's. I mean, these are big brands that have, they're like, hey, we want to take part in this conversation. We don't want to be left out. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 2 months with 420 this year in 2022, because we're thinking there's going to be so many brands. We've got, I think the last count was 4,500 brands out there are buying our data on whatever platform of choice they are buying their media. And I think that's incredible because, our data marketplace has really only been around for the last 2 years. And so, brand marketers, CMOs, they really want to, be part of that conversation. Jesse, how do you think of all this? Obviously, you came into this world on the cannabis front, in a very siloed fashion, and now you're all over the place. You're partnering with all these brands. Yeah. Right. You even did a big cameo campaign, right, with Columbia Care. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what was the focus on that program?
No, I mean, look, on the cameo campaign was a ton of fun because we basically got an opportunity to engage with a bunch of, public voices that wanted to, in their own way, talk about, our technology or the retail experience. And it was a lot of fun to watch them do that because you could tell they were sort of almost like laughing through it. They were having a lot of fun
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. They were having a lot of fun being able to talk about, like, let me tell you where you should go buy weed at. Right. So I think that was a ton of fun. And I think the campaigns like that and brand development and brand partnerships, I think it shows that, one, as marketers in this space, we can't be too precious, right? Like, we can't come in with all of these preconceived notions and thinking that the playbook from this industry or this is going to work or, will work or has worked. You just sort of have to drop everything and be willing to have some fun with it and not take it too seriously, experiment with a lot of different architectures from a brand point of view, products and forms and formulations and partnerships. So the cameo thing was totally out there. No one had really done it before. And we said, hey, this sounds like fun. Like, let's see if this resonates with the communities. And the engagement was incredible. Like, we had, I'm trying to think of what his name from Queer Eye. I did one of the videos and it was like one of the most popular ones we did. People would literally stop me and be like, oh, I saw that video. So I think it's a great opportunity to engage with our communities.
Yeah. I think too, Jesse, a very telling sign, this year during the Super Bowl, obviously everybody watches the commercials. Everyone's interested to see what brands are out there. But yet again, another year of no cannabis ads. However, there was one ad that did sneak through, and it wasn't for cannabis, but it was a Skechers ad. It basically was the only cannabis ad that aired during Super Bowl that wasn't a cannabis ad, but it was with Willie Nelson, talking about the legalization of comfort.
Yeah, is so good. That,
by the way, brilliant, right? Like, it was amazing. And I love seeing that because I know there's so many brands who wanted to produce or tried to produce a segment during the Super Bowl. Even Weed Naps had an amazing, commercial.
The broccoli one was incredible. I mean, look, I think that's an incredible indication of where we're going, right? As an industry and as a marketer, sort of sitting back and watching this. We were very fortunate to win and be recognized, shortlisted for awards at Clio and Marcom and a number of things last year. But I remember sitting back and almost being like, oh my God, like inspired by some of the work that a lot of other brands and companies in our space did last year that you don't necessarily see as much. I'm embarrassed to say it, right? As someone who operates in the industry, half of the work that was recognized, I hadn't even seen. Right. And it was because the amount of channels that we can publish it through are so limited, and we're still trying to figure that out. So it's not like, I would be watching a TV show and that ad would come on. But some of the work that was done, some of these agencies and brands that are producing work in our space is incredible. It's super high level work, and it's really beautiful stuff and deserves a home, right? It deserves to be seen by more people. And so I think that candidly, the last 2 years, I've seen an incredible increase in the production value and some of the just overall brand expressions and work and things that are being done. So that to me is an early indicator that, you know, more sort of normalized advertising opportunities and the ability to see these things more places is right around the corner. If you guys haven't seen them, which I assume many haven't, I'll be honest, I hadn't, check out, you know, Clio's website or go to a number of these other places.
Oh yeah, great one.
So there's some incredible work. And the broccoli one from Weed Maps, like the Willy one was incredible. The broccoli one from Weed Maps was great too. It just didn't get approved. So
yeah. So, well, I mean, listen, they definitely got it out there, which was great. I think, you know, one of the questions that, you know, comes back to me a lot, because obviously we do a lot of campaigns for a lot of big brands who are buying, you know, the cannabis data, you know, they keep coming back and they're like, I don't understand why am I getting a better lift? Why am I getting a better video completion rate, you know, when I'm doing rich media? How am I lowering our CPA costs? And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to that slide we had up. It's like, these are a generation of folks that really understand how to navigate digital channels. They are engaged. And I think it's finally something that's very cool in the sense of, hey, I can actually drive an ad to this person where I know I'm going to get a higher lift. And it could be the exact ad that's being targeted to someone else, right? But because this, you know, granular focus of this consumer is kind of a digital native, it works very well. You know, I think a lot of brands sometimes they, you know, are like, hey, we're very conservative. You know, we don't want to put something out there. We might, you know, we don't want the consumer thinking that we know that they are buying products. And you don't have to do any type of creative or even have any language that says it. You have the data to know who they are, right? So you can actually come up with, you know, an ad that maybe is a little more spicy when it comes to, you know, how you talk about a word like delicious or mouthwatering, you know, things like that are just kind of heighten the senses as someone's reading, right? There's a lot of things you could play with. Jesse, I know for you, at least coming from strictly the endemic side, your hands are tied on what you can and can't do when it comes to media. And I think that's something interesting I'd love for you to talk about, just so people know, you know, you have to have very specific creatives running in very specific states and jurisdictions, you know, with all sorts of compliance, which probably makes your job somewhat difficult, but because we work together, we make it easy for you.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I didn't want it to come across as an advertisement, but yeah, I basically outsource it to you guys at this point because I can't keep up with it. The reality is, look, I mean, I came into this space and it was almost like, you know, we had been working in ad tech on social, which was you know, at the time, especially very cutting edge with regards to targeting and sort of what we could do in putting the right message in front of the right person at the right time. Right. And then I come into cannabis and I'm like, all right, great. You know, I've got all these ideas, and you sit down with our compliance and regulatory team, which is robust, by the way. Obviously, as you can imagine, we have a lot of those people, but I sat down with the team and they're like, no, you can't do any of that. And I would be like, well, can we do this? And like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, okay, so what can we do? And it was like, well, you can buy a billboard, be careful what it says, depending on the market and where it's located, proximity with regards to a church or a school or anything else. You can buy, you know, like the back page in like a magazine, some of them. And there's maybe some early advertising that you can do on programmatic and things like that. And, you know, those things have continued to sort of expand and to open up, but it was almost like going in a time machine, going back in time, except we couldn't do TV, still can't do TV.
Right.
So, you know, we're starting to do OTT. We've got some partnership stuff with Fubo. We're the official cannabis sponsor of the PFL. So on all of their broadcasts, their fights, everything like that, we have the ability to do some sort of mass consumer reach there. You know, we do a ton of programmatic advertising and, you know, we work directly with you guys on ensuring that creative, those placements, et cetera, are all compliant, which again, changes every 25 minutes, right? So it's part of the reason why we work with the Canaregs product, is to try to keep up to date and up to speed on those changes. And then now we're getting approached by many people like who are probably on this webinar, mainstream brands that want to do partnerships, right? In either starting to think about developing products or just finding ways to do interesting things with regards to our dispensaries or our community marketing, because again, there's sort of that opportunity to resonate with a community that they may not be directly tied to right now. So it's a wild time to try to figure out how to navigate this, but coming from digital marketing into this space, it was like, none of that is available. You can't do any of this, no Facebook, no anything. So it's been a learning curve for sure.
Yeah. So Jesse, I know there was a quick question that came in here from Keith as far as, which vendor is providing data. And I'm happy to answer that, Keith. And, we'll hold all the rest of the questions till the end, but all of the data that we're utilizing in the data marketplace, it's all sourced from 100% offline second-party purchase data. And that purchase data is really coming from leading point of sale systems, leading loyalty platforms, e-commerce and delivery platforms. We go through a very, very rigorous hygiene process. All of the data is anonymous. And so we kind of package that up into thousands of different segments where brands can literally go in and really choose the associated segments that they want to run with. So it could be a snacking category. It could be a Dunkin' Donuts category. It could be a, food and beverage and sports enthusiast category overlaid with, very specific transaction points on what they're buying. There's also a lot of brands who say, hey, we want to do total custom segments. Can you work with us, right? And they infuse them. And so that's really what we do as well, where we can really hone in on any specific data type and create custom segments for those brands as well. So really great question. And I'm sure a lot of people had that thought as well. Jesse, as far as, your kind of outlook and your view, obviously the 2 years we saw such a rapid acceleration, of cannabis acceptance. Not really, there's no stigma anymore. Obviously you have someone, the NFL, right? They're not, testing anymore, and they're now doing cannabis research for traumatic brain injuries, right? So it's now becoming this, okay, it's like we're going out and we're having a cocktail, right? I say to, Conrad, who's my CMO all the time, I'm like, Conrad, you call me every Friday night and we have a martini together, right? It's the same thing, right? I think, Jesse, your children, down the line, will be going with their friends to a bar and maybe having a joint. And it's no big deal. We're not even thinking about it, right? And so that's why, at least from my viewpoint, this is such a critical time because we're ahead, right? Brands have the opportunity to get ahead before everyone kind of comes in and starts utilizing this data. So it's a really good time. So I wanted to know from you, what's your kind of outlook, 2022 going into 2023, I think across the entire category.
Oh boy. What's that expression? People that look into crystal balls typically usually end up eating glass. So I'll try to be very careful in what I guess here. I think, look, you're going to see continued reform at both the state and the federal level over the next 24 to 36 months. I think you've got midterm elections coming up. And so you're seeing a lot of sort of, spinning and things happening right now with regards to there being more momentum around bills to pass things like safe banking or a number of other provisions that would make the industry a little bit easier to operate in, candidly, right? I think from a overall sort of patient and customer base expansion point of view, again, I think we will see this continued movement of changing the indexing with regards to the demos that we serve. So the expansion in certain demographics will be outpaced compared to ones that we already serve today, which means that if you look at, let's say a chart of what percentage in each one of those audience segmentations make up our customer bases today, that will change significantly over the next 2 years. So you'll start to see that curve blend a bit, right? And look more like other industries or other audiences that we would serve. I think that from a overall sort of stigma and acceptance, I think you're right. I think it's becoming more and more normalized to come over somewhere. And if you see someone drinking a cannabis infused beverage or an edible or hosting a THC infused dinner party, right? A number of different things that we see now, products are going to continue to get formulated and developed to map to those lifestyles. You're going to see more and more sort of ambassadors of those things coming to the forefront. Those expanded products that map to expanded use cases continue to expand the audience, right? And so I think that, my son is almost 3.5. If I think that there's a world in which he is, digitally
3.5 going on 12. Come on.
Yeah, he's enormous. He's the only 3.5-year-old that has to buy a razor to shave right now. So he's if I think about a world, right, in which is there a future where he's digitally immersed in the metaverse or whatever you want to call it, basically, buying cannabis that then gets delivered an hour later to his house, and he pays for it leveraging some sort of blockchain or crypto application. Yeah, that feels probably more likely than less likely at this point. And so I think that there's significant change that's coming with regards to the way that consumers learn about products and engage with brands. I think our industry is one of the ones that'll be at the forefront of that, because we have to be, because we can't speak to consumers through so many of the sort of standard channels. So we're going to have to continue to innovate and create more ways to engage with them.
Love it. Well, Jesse, I'm kind of looking at the clock, and I know we have 10 minutes. And I know I'm getting a flurry of questions actually sent to me right now. So I think we should go and answer some of these questions, because we could be here for a little bit. But
sure,
while we're doing that, guys, we do have this incredible audience playbook that our team has really put together. We use a lot of data from our own sources. We partner with MRI. We have amazing, strategic opportunities in there to help you align on, hey, what's the best way, to utilize. So if you use your phone and scan the barcode on the screen, you could download it and, go through it later. But it's definitely a really nice playbook that our team has put together.
I don't know if I have that. I don't know if I have this one yet. So I'm stealing it real quick before you guys take it off the screen.
Get it downloaded. So a couple of questions. Someone asked here, Brian, what are some example of mainstream brands that have used your data? Great question. We've got about 4,000 brands right now that are utilizing the data. I think from a few that I could talk about publicly, I know I mentioned City Row, Uber Eats was a really great one. They actually did a pretty interesting story with us that came out in Bloomberg, really talking about the category, right? So going after snackers, going after those folks who are buying any type of cannabis product across the country in legal markets. Those campaigns did great. I think it's kind of interesting. A few months later, we did see some stories that came out in the fall about Uber potentially being able to deliver cannabis related products in a few provinces in Canada. And so I think that was the instigator, right? They're like, whoa, this is our consumer base, right? They're hungry, they're using their phones, and this is a great way to capture their attention. I know their view through rates were through the roof, which is why they continued to spend. City Row, like I told you, for them, it was it's all about the return on ad spend. So it is a very costly product. It's over $2,000. So really kind of targeting that right consumer for people who are buying CBD related products worked very well for them. Lagunitas is another one, really utilizing the data because it aligns with them, right? They do have a product that does have, THC in it. So really great question. There's lots of great stuff in the playbook as well. Another question that just came in here, have we partnered with any mainstream brands on cannabis specific holidays like 420? Yes. Well, I think on the endemic side, we partnered with a ton, even Jesse, but I think on the mainstream side, yes, we have done a lot of programs. We did a really great program this past 420 for a number of QSR companies. I can't really talk publicly about them, but they went phenomenal. We're already kind of lining up a number of brands for April, a lot of exciting launches that I'd say keep your eyes out because a few of them are big surprises. So we're excited about that. And I think there's still a ton of time, at least on a planning perspective. We're only in February. So to get a campaign up and running for 420 this year there's plenty of runway for those who are interested.
And Jeff, can I give a quick shout out to the other less talked about cannabis holidays that
yes.
our patients and customers and communities actually do engage with? So 420, everybody knows. 7/10, right? July 10th.
Yep,
you write
July
on a sheet of paper and turn it over. It says oil. So that's sort of like our concentrate holiday, right? tons of everybody out smoking vapes and using concentrated products. Croptober, right, is when we take down the outdoor grows. So end of October, we usually have big Croptober parties and activations around that. And then huge shout out to the holidays in December, right? Because we have a campaign that we run every year that says you have in-laws and we have cannabis. We see a massive spike in sales for the holidays at end of November and December. Our customers like to stock up. So it does make it easier to deal with some of the crowds at the holiday season. Everybody's got a crazy uncle. So just throwing that out there.
Okay, here's another question from Kelly. Is cannabis essentially an emerging CPG vertical with more compliance layers? How will emerging economies like cannabis and crypto change the future of marketing and advertising? Great question. Yes, it absolutely is. Cannabis is a CPG product, right? And I think it is definitely, it is emerging. But I think with 4,000 traditional brands buying the data today, it's more than emerging. It's here, right? So it's amazing. As Jesse was saying before, yes, there's definitely a lot of layers of compliance, but really the only layers of compliance that we're dealing with is on the endemic side. So if you're a mainstream brand, if you're a liquor company, if you're a donut company, if you are a peas and corn related product in the supermarket, you don't have to follow compliance rules if you're just utilizing, buying the data, right? So that's something just to think about too. It would work just as if you were activating another campaign, targeting a very specific segmented information of data. Like you might say, hey, I want to target everyone who lives in New York and shops at Target, right? That could be a segment. Now you could actually overlay that with, I also want to add anybody who has spent $50 or more this month on vape related products, since we're talking about vapes. So really great question. It's interesting because Jesse and I have worked together for, literally over a decade in the traditional brand world, working with the biggest brands out there. So for us, this is kind of, really 2007 all over again, but just a different product, right?
No, look, to reinforce what Jeff said, just to make sure that everybody understands what was just said, it is easier for any other company to advertise to my customers using my data than it is for me to advertise to my customers using my data. So I do think that is the part that we always joke around about internally, is an incredible opportunity for mainstream brands. We're spitting off a ton of data that we actually really can't reuse and do a lot of the things that our sort of partners, brands in mainstream can do to target those same consumers.
Absolutely. And I think we have one more question before we wrap up. What does the future of cannabis legislation look like and legalization, and how will it impact on the future of consumption trends? So I think, as Jesse was saying before, we don't have a crystal ball, but we do know that both sides, both Republican and Democrats alike, they all support cannabis. So as long as we can get, to federal legalization, I think we have no issues beyond that, right? Everyone will then partake. And so, every day, just kind of keep your eye on the news, because there's something that comes out of the Senate. There's something that they're talking about when it comes to, Safe Banking Act and all that stuff. There's so many interesting things that are happening. So we'll have to wait and see. We're all hoping for, finally federal legalization, make a lot of our jobs much easier. But we thank you guys for, attending and coming and listening. And like we were saying before, check out the Alchemy Podcast. Super fun, lots of great guests, a lot of celebrities, and some of them are actually quite funny. That's what we've got. Graham, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff and Jesse. That was absolutely fascinating. Really, really appreciate you joining us today. Just as a reminder, Jeff mentioned it at the beginning there, but the podcast is called Alchemy. Just Google Alchemy Podcast, and you can find out more about Philo at hellophilo.com. That's hellophilo.com. Thanks again to Philo for sponsoring this Brand Academy. The IAB have a number of learning and development events coming up in the month of March. Next Wednesday, March the 2nd, we have a class on privacy law essentials for digital advertising. On Wednesday, March the 16th, we have a class on the legal issues regarding influencer marketing. And on Wednesday, March the 30th, our good friends at Burst Trainings will be delivering a class on creating an engaging virtual experience. To register for all of these events and to find out more about the IAB and the benefits of IAB membership for your brand, please visit iab.com. Thanks once more to Jeff and Jesse and the entire team at Philo for their partnership on this Brand Academy. You will be receiving an email with a link to the recording in the very near future. And thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye.